Howdy, folks, and welcome to your storm chasing forecast show for Thursday, August 27th. I am Gabriel Harber, and I'm once again joined by a guest coach. Some of you might know the man that I am about to be speaking with. He is none other than Anthony Ferrio, better known as AKA GreenyWX. What is going on today, my friend?
Pretty good. I've been eyeing this setup for the last week or so, as it's one of the few pretty decently synoptically driven setups that we've had in a while. So it's been easy to point out far out on models, especially the ECMWF.
Anthony, you have already had yourself a pretty amazing week. If you could tell folks maybe about what it is you saw a few days ago, that might be a great place for us to start.
A few days ago, me and my friends went on a storm chase in north central Delmarva, and it was August 20th. We had a nice MCV setup, and it turned out that we made the right call because it turned out to be a pretty large regional tornado outbreak with multiple tornadoes across southeast Pennsylvania, Maryland, Delaware, and even in New Jersey and New York got their own fair share of tornadoes. Delmarva got the Dover tornado, which I was on, and I was also on the Barkley EF1 that happened just further west of that tornado before the Dover tornado. Yeah, it was a pretty interesting experience. I was just a little close to it.
Yeah, I remember in our group chat looking at the CC drop and seeing your little spotter dot like right up in the ass crack. So
Yeah.
I was like, I wonder if Greedy is okay out there, man.
Yeah, it was a pretty interesting experience. It caught us off guard. It made a pretty sharp northern turn, a little sharper than I would have expected considering it started out moving a little more eastward. But sometimes it happens, especially with the fact that the tornado itself was more storm interaction and boundary driven, which can deviate tornadoes.
So let's go ahead and dive into today's severe weather. I see you've got the categorical outlook there centered on that slight risk area for today.
Today, we will have a pretty substandard slight risk across the Northeast and Mid Atlantic, mainly wind driven with a 15% wind threat, a 5% hail risk, and a 2% tornado risk. Again, pretty common to see up here during these summer events. Most of them won't have a two tour because, again, it's just no shear. It's just westerly flow and linear slop. So it is pretty interesting. The tornado threat doesn't look half bad, and I'll probably break that down in a bit. For the 500 millibar, it's pretty standard for this time of year, though the trough itself is not horribly impressive. The flow itself is around 30 to 40 knots, not terribly strong, but the trough itself is fairly amplified. You have that nice little dip here, and there's a pretty decent shortwave that's going to be carried throughout parts of Pennsylvania, New York, and will move eastward into the late afternoon and evening hours. Along and just ahead of this shortwave, it looks pretty possible that we're going to have some enhanced flow, and that seems to be what's going to drive these storms and convective initiation.
All right, Greeny, before we go any deeper into the forecast, I want to remind folks that the awesome tool they see up on the screen is the Weatherfront browser app. I'm sure you folks have heard about Weatherfront. Android just came out, so if you'd been waiting to get that on your mobile device, now is the time to do so. If you start your subscription, you're going to get 7 days free no matter which platform you're on, iOS, Android. But if you're an Android user, as a way of saying thank you for being so patient while they've been working on that over the last year, you're actually going to get half off your first month as well. So you get 7 days free and half off your first month. It's a great deal. And then once you start that subscription, you'll use that same login information to log into the browser app, log into the desktop app. It's a great suite of weather products. So, link in the description for that. And Greeny, go ahead and take us further down into the atmosphere.
For our 850 millibar winds or our low level jet, it doesn't look all that bad. We have winds coming in from the south southwest and moving to the northeast at roughly 25 to 30 knots, which isn't awful for the summer in the slightest. I look for winds coming from straight southward or southwest flow. Usually, when you get winds like that, you get a lot better wind shear, more moisture return, and also more inflated low level hodographs, so you get a better tornado supercell environment. For our surface maps, we have temperatures nearing the 90s further south, and as we go up north, unfortunately due to some cloud cover, which is a concern for today's threat, surface temps are likely going to at max hit around 80 degrees, and I'll talk about that later when it comes to the thermodynamic profile. But if you also look at the surface winds, our surface winds are coming pretty much straight from the south. Good thing about that is that it'll back our surface winds, again, increasing low-level wind shear, therefore increasing the tornado threat. And another thing that will also aid is low-level moisture in convection. So overall, not too bad. One thing that has caught my interest is that later in the day, it does appear possible that there will be a bit of a surface low trying to develop along the cold front. And usually, sometimes those things will aid in low-level backing, therefore in localizing a more potent tornado threat. Surface dew points, pretty average for the summer. We have upper 60s, low 70s dew points on the latest HRRR run. I do believe that HRRR might be overmixing this environment, so dew points might end up being a little higher than what is forecasted here. Probably closer to 73, 74 degree dew points across most of the warm sector, especially further south as we go. But still, pretty potent low-level environment. Pretty juicy for storms and maybe some supercells if storms could organize into such.
Hey folks, if you want to support Storm Chaser coaching, the best way to do so is our channel membership. It's just $3 per month, or actually $4 per month if you're on an iOS device, because the App Store has to take their cut. But whatever the case is, you get access to some awesome perks. You get a nice, warm, fuzzy feeling knowing that you've helped to continue make Storm Chaser coaching a reality. And that join button just below this video is all you have to click. So check it out when you have a chance. All right, Greeny, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the CAPE that we have available for storms today.
One thing I will say is I'm quite impressed by the thermodynamics that HRRR has been printing for this environment, despite the fact that it appears to be overmixing. We have roughly 2,000 to 2,500 joules per kilogram of mixed layer CAPE. That is plenty for storms to feed off of, especially here. Now, as we move later in the day, this plume of 2,000, 2,500 joules per kilogram, and HRRR here even has this little spot of 3,000 joules per kilogram of mixed layer CAPE here. This plume is likely going to move northeast throughout the day, and especially as convective initiation takes place, extending from southeast Pennsylvania up into New England. Of course, with northern extent, you're likely going to lose the thermodynamics due to the fact you're going to have less moisture, and especially further north due to the stronger kinematics, you're likely going to have more morning convection and cloud cover, which is a concern. Either way, if this much CAPE can materialize, we should be in for a pretty interesting day. Another note is the fact that we have very strong 3 CAPE in place across the mid-Atlantic, especially in portions of New Jersey and eastern Pennsylvania. Even as early as 12 o'clock, we have well over 100. If I were to likely go to over here and actually pull, we have nearly 203 kilometer CAPE. That is a lot. That is juicy. And when given the right storm interactions and environment, it can be very supportive of surprise tornado events for wind shear. Our surface to 3 kilometer SRH isn't looking really all that bad. We are looking at values that are likely going to be around 150 SRH, which, while not incredibly high, could get the job done with the low-level thermodynamics we have in place. All right, and here's a parameter I use quite often. Energy Helicity Index, I think it's, in my opinion, better than STP or supercell composite. While those composites aren't awful, I feel like overall, Energy Helicity Index tends to more accurately represent the environment. I know not everyone will agree with that, and that's fine. To each their own. But this is usually my go-to parameter to get a good idea of what the environment is. And throughout the day, it gets fairly high. It's not the highest I've seen it, but we have around 2.8, nearly 3. And while we're at it, I'll pull a few soundings. And overall, not a bad environment whatsoever. When it comes to our hodograph, I'm not going to lie, I'm impressed. This is a pretty good environment. Whoa. We have a pretty fat cape profile. As you can see, the sounding we pulled has 3,000 joules per kilogram of mixed layer cape and over nearly 253 cape. That's pretty robust for a mixed layer for mid-level lapse rates. While they're not great, they'll definitely do the job here. Usually when it comes to northeast threats, I usually look around 6.5 to 7.0, though I've seen a lot of threats, a lot of severe weather threats here perform well with 5.5, as low as 5.0 sometimes. When it comes to our hodograph, not bad. It looks with our current sounding, we have around almost 100 surface to 1 kilometer SRH and around 150 surface to 3 kilometer SRH. While our deep layer shear values are a little bit on the lower side, if you look at the hodograph here, it's fairly long. We have quite a bit of wind from the 7 to 9 kilometer, so I would expect any supercell in this environment to be fairly well ventilated if we can get any discrete supercells.
Okay, Greeny. So, a couple of questions for you. You mentioned early on during your forecast that the cloud cover to the north, especially, could be a limiting factor for spatial extent of this severe weather threat today. What would happen if that cloud cover actually was a lot less than expected, potentially cleared out earlier? What would you expect to happen with this event?
I would certainly expect a stronger thermodynamic environment, which would therefore overall increase the severity of the threat, especially to northern extent. And I feel like with that, at least, we should expect at least a higher tornado probability further north. I'm pretty sure the SPC itself has stated that one of the biggest uncertainties, especially with northern extent, is that cloud cover. But up there it does have the better kinematic environment. So if you can increase the thermodynamics up there, then we should overall get a higher severe threat up there.
I do notice, Greeny, also, and you've got it put up there on the screen right now, that the winds are actually coming out of the south southeast across the ocean, across the Atlantic, back up onto the land. So, are there any potential, is there any possibility for there to be a sea breeze that comes into play, maybe provide some additional lift for some of these storms?
That does seem possible. As you can see here, if you look very carefully, you can see this colder mass of air moving in across portions of New Jersey, Delmarva, and up here. And I'm pretty sure, and later you'll see the effect of that. Sea breezes often can be a big turn on or big turn off when it comes to severe weather threats, and sometimes they can induce favorable storm interactions, but at the same time, they can completely waste an environment. So your storms will immediately die once they cross into that cooler, more stable environment.
Greeny, we finally arrive at everyone's favorite part of the show, the SimRef Showdown, that is simulated reflectivity, where we take a look at the convection allowing models and see if these storms are in fact going to materialize, at least according to the models, in the areas that we just predicted with our forecast. So I see you've got the HRRR already up there on the screen. Let's go ahead and see what the models are saying.
Starting with the HRRR, as you can see, my concern about morning convection and cloud cover does seem to be materializing with the latest run. As you see, it's around 6 o'clock in the morning, and we do have convection that is going to move through the area. But the good thing is that it does seem like it's going to clear out by early afternoon. And with storms likely initiating around mid to late afternoon and moving through that time period, we could have enough time for the air mass to destabilize between them. But that is one of my main concerns, and it seems HRRR is solving it pretty well. Now, when it comes to the main severe weather threat, it looks like around 4 o'clock, that's when storms are going to start getting their act together. If we zoom in on this cluster right here, as you can see, as I pointed out, it looks like supercells could be possible. As you can see, you have these classic little supercell beams. They'll likely be on the mini side, so that's probably why they don't have much on the updraft helicity side of things. But I think if the supercells don't immediately go upscale, as HRRR shows, we could get a pretty half decent tornado threat. And then, of course, if you want to compare it to other models, let's start with the convection vomit, that is the RRFS, shows a quite different output, which is to be expected. But as you can see, RRFS wants supercells because it always does. Let's check the impasse version, or the better version. And as you can see, it shows quite a similar solution to the HRRR. Storms are likely going to get their act together around 3 o'clock. Placing is a little different in some spots. But as you can see here, it does have some, while more linear, it does have some updraft velocity tracks. And in some of these linear segments, if you can point out, there are some transient supercell structures. Even the NAM nest itself, which is usually a very overconvecting and linear biased model, even shows quite a few supercells across the mid-Atlantic, especially in eastern PA and parts of southern New Jersey. And it's not entirely different from the HRRR, while of course showing its clear biases. But I do think that's an interesting thing to point out from the NAM nest. I usually don't use it. But when it starts showing similarities between other cams, that's usually what gets my attention. Overall, I think severe weather threat is pretty interesting. Of course, it has some fail modes, which is to be expected up here because it's the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic. But I feel like if there's any changes to expect, it would mainly be the expansion of the slight, maybe a bit further south, and the marginal and slight risk being extended more eastward. When it comes to the tornado threat, I would personally extend the tornado threat a little further south and eastward. I would probably have the two-tour extending into parts of northern Maryland, covering most of southeast Pennsylvania, and maybe extending a little more eastward into New Jersey. Wind threat, considering it's the main threat, again, I would expect it to adjust the 5 and 15 wind eastward, therefore adjusting the slight risk. And hail, I would not change. Overall, hail threat's going to be fairly low. While we do have some dry air aloft, overall, it's still a pretty wet environment. So at most, you're going to get small hail in these any strong updraft, especially if you have supercells. But that being said, they're likely not going to be that large.
Remember to check out those links in the description below, and then watch another video.